The Dead Have Never Died by Edward C. Randall. Read for you by BlueFriend in beautiful BC. Chapter 23. Future of a Child. The Orthodox teachings make no attempt to tell us what becomes of children who go out of the earth plane in infancy. How many millions of mothers have had babies too young for speech, boys and girls just able to talk and walk, sink into a dreamless sleep, and having kissed for the last time the lips of love, have seen the little bodies lowered with tender hands into the grave, and as the earth fell upon the casket, have heard from the lips of the ignorance, ashes to ashes and dust to dust. With hearts without hope, they have gone back to the house of sorrow. The toys, the little bed, the vacant chair, the ache in the heart, the tears that fall in countless thousands of homes, and the cries that go out in the night to know where in the vast universe the baby is, if it lives at all. What becomes of those who go out in infancy, you ask? Do they develop in mind and body? Shall we know them and meet them again? Will they know us? Is there anyone to comfort and care for them and teach them? Do they miss and seek the mother love? These and 1,000 more questions have been asked in the countless ages that have gone, and are being asked in every desolate home in the world today. Let me tell you what I have learned of those conditions through many years of speech with those in the afterlife. I repeat what I have said before and shall say again, for it is the key to understanding that the infant at conception possesses an etheric form, at that moment clothed in a physical garment or flesh body. This etheric form is material, composed of matter, and as matter cannot be destroyed, it follows that that etheric child body cannot, by any possibility, be annihilated. The infant etheric form, by the process of dissolution, passes out of the physical garment which it took on at the moment of conception, the same garment that it wore at birth, and becomes an inhabitant of the next plane of consciousness, where everything is etheric, where nothing physical can enter. This change may be likened to an earth birth. There are thousands of childless women who never in earth life found expression for the mother love. These, with countless others who find their greatest happiness in doing good together with those of blood relation, attend at such a time and take care for the little stranger in the new environment. Let me give an instance that came under my personal investigation. It is a well-known fact that children up to about 3 years of age are able to and do see spirit people. Some have spirit playmates. The instance I'm about to relate was the passing of a little boy, only 1 week old, who had a sister a little under 3 years of age, with whom I was privileged to make an experiment. This little girl, night after night, saw the baby boy and described him. He was in the same room with 2 spirit nurses in attendance, while another woman was from time to time described as being present. Again, this 3-year-old sister often saw the spirit baby when she was away from her home. On various occasions, I verified these statements by inquiry from those in the afterlife during our investigation, and found that what the little sister related had actually taken place. The woman who appeared from time to time was the grandmother. She, assisted by 2 nurses, cared for the little stranger, and on several occasions, before he could articulate plainly, prior to his 4th birthday, I heard him speak to me. This was a most valuable experience. Children in the afterlife are cared for very much as they are cared for here. There are those who find their greatest delight in mothering the motherless, and teaching them words of speech and wisdom, so under such unselfish care the children reach mental and bodily maturity just the same as they would as if they had remained in this world. The etheric process of development is interesting. Children need mother love, no less in spirit than in earth life, and as the mother sleeps, those in charge place the etheric baby form close to her heart, where it rests absorbing the love so necessary to its existence. We little know how close the afterlife is, how close its inhabitants come to us, the influence that they exert on us, or the result of our thought vibrations upon them. Then again, as the children grow, they keep in touch with us from day to day, and when we go out into the afterlife, they know and greet us as we enter the life that has no night. There are, in the next life, kindergartens, schools, colleges, and universities of learning, just as we have here, and what is more, the inhabitants do not cease to study and increase their store of knowledge when they reach a certain age, but there are great lecture halls where the advanced ones teach the supreme laws of nature, where all are welcome and all go, and so the secrets of the universe are understood. There is but one aristocracy in the life to come, and that is founded on the refinement and development of character. Measured by this standard, how very poor are our very rich. I have often written that the aristocrats of the afterlife have gained their positions by helping others less fortunate. They rise by raising others. Those alone stand erect who stoop above the lowly. Here's what a sojourner in the next plane has said of the little ones. Many people have puzzled as to the state and condition of young children in the spirit world, and it is on that subject that I desire to speak, more particularly tonight. There are millions of young children of all ages passing into the spirit world every year. Some of them are of a very tender age, while others know right from wrong. It's an interesting subject to inquire as to what they do in the spirit life. At the outset, I must tell you that there is a divine law in the spirit world, that whosoever passes into that kingdom before he has reached to man's estate upon the earth plane shall grow mentally to the stature of a man. You can gather from that the youngest child, even the infant which was taken from you, will grow mentally and spiritually on the other side of life. Clairvoyants and others have often described young children in the spirit life who have been recognized by mothers and fathers. They, perhaps, years after, have been somewhat astonished to hear of the child looking much older, and they have not been able to account for it. You will understand that the presentation of the spiritual form is in order that those in the flesh may be able to see them through the physical senses, and to note that they appear to be growing towards manhood and womanhood. I am afraid that many people upon your earth plane today are neglectful of their responsibilities to their children. If God has given you such a flower as a child, it is incumbent upon you, by example and precept, to train that child in spiritual things, so that ultimately he will be with you in the kingdom of heaven and will rejoice in the knowledge that you guided him spiritually when an infant. Oh, but how careless are many people with their children. They forget that a child is all the time taking note, not of what they're saying, but what they're doing. I assure you that if you are unmindful of your responsibilities towards your children, you will undoubtedly have to pay the penalty when you reach the spirit side of life. Too little attention has been paid to the going out of children. The world has little knowledge on that subject. No greater blessing can come to the fathers and mothers of every nation and tribe than to know that children with bodies too frail to carry them through the earth life are not lost in going from among us, but in the other life go right on with their growth and development under the care and guidance of good men and women who, for love of humanity, do the necessary work and so enrich themselves. I am impressed not to leave this subject without a word of warning to do no murder. Know that at the moment of conception, out of the mass of the universal good, out of the life mass, an etheric atom, a body infinitesimal in size and perfect in form, is clothed, and no matter whether the physical birth is natural or premature, that life force, so individualized, has commenced its journey back to God, and all the powers in the universe cannot change its ultimate destiny. I am told that into the afterlife countless millions of children have come and are coming who have never had the advantage of a natural physical birth, and earth experience is so necessary to their development. But that heartless mothers, by abortive acts and with the aid of dastardly physicians, have done and are doing countless murders, more terrible in result than the taking of the life of a man, because the unborn infant is so weak and helpless. If this knowledge shall cause any mother to spare the life of her unborn child, blood of her blood and bone of her bone, or the physician to pause in his criminal act, sorrow untold will pass both by. "I want to tell you," a teacher in the afterlife said, "of a little waif that came to us in infancy. We taught and carefully guarded and schooled her in the pure conditions of our sphere until she approached womanhood, but she had no contrasts. Therefore she could not judge of the relative purity and delights of her environment. In order that she should be able to enjoy her home and the glories of our world, it was necessary for her to have a knowledge of earthly conditions. And so I was instructed to conduct this child back to earth from time to time. When this child first returned to earth and was among your people, she could hardly endure even to examine the gross conditions, and could not understand how people could exist in such dark, crude elements. But as I led her along from one condition to another, over the road she would have gone had she remained on earth for the ordinary allotted period, I said to her, "Had you lived your time in the body, you would have been in the condition in which you see these people." I also told her that they would look gross to her when they reached the spirit state, but that in course of time they would improve enough to assume the state of purity and peace that she enjoyed. And as we journeyed on, we met one whose earthly experiences had unfolded, and the little lady said, "That one looks different." And I told her that this one had received a higher training. And we passed along to another place in the earth life where there were children of the poor and ignorant, as well as of the rich and the learned. And we tarried until my little charge thoroughly learned the different environments of children on earth, and the great contrast between their homes, daily life, and schooling, and those in spirit life. This child had never known anything but innocence and purity, and she was far removed from the ordinary conditions of the childhood of earth. It was long before she could, in any degree, recognize it as a reality. And having learned of the methods of training in the institutions of earth, we pursued our investigations farther along, and finally we came to where there was a great Orthodox church, and there, unseen, we mingled with the congregation. She said, "This church house is not like ours at all. What is taught here?" Well, presently the services began. I told her to listen carefully to the minister, for here she would get the average experience of the church methods, and be able to see wherein a great work in brave hands is greatly needed on the spirit side. Then the minister proceeded with his discourse in his regular methodical manner, telling the people all he thought essential to prepare them to enter higher realms of the spirit. But the girl, now grown to nearly womanhood, could not accept the dicta of the minister, for she had, up to now, been raised in the spirit world, and had learned nothing that was in harmony with the methods attempted by the church to enlighten the people and prepare them for future realities. Therefore, the teachings of the minister seemed to her so gross, so false, so out of line with all she had ever seen, heard, or read of in the land which had always been her home, that she hesitated to remain. But I told her that her future work and welfare required that she learned as much as possible of the earth conditions in which your people live, and the kind of preparation such earth conditions make for their inheritance in our life. But the more the young lady heard of the sermon, the more she disbelieved it. In fact, it was so much opposed to what she knew of the conditions on this side, and it was so different from what preparation while on earth for entrance to and enjoyment of spirit life should consist, that at my suggestion she resolved to visit those who had just left the earth plane, schooled under its teaching, and witness the effect of it. We therefore journeyed on. Chapter 24. Actualities of the Afterlife. After birth, death is the greatest privilege that comes to mankind. If death did not occur, there would be old age, feebleness, poverty, pain, and suffering forever. With it, splendid life on through the ages, progress, perpetual youth and vigor. Such is the heritage of all who have lived, or who shall live, in the ages to come as inhabitants of this plane. Such are the benefits coming through dissolution. Physically considered, in the final separation of the soul or spirit body from the flesh garment, there are no discomforts. As the etheric form goes out through the process called death, pain ceases, and then for a short period comes what is usually called unconsciousness. During the passing of the soul, when the individual leaves the tenement of flesh, when the spirit of man hurries forth from the old housing, there is no sensation. That period of time may be characterized as a sleep. Then comes the awakening, the return of sensation, consciousness. Such is the true resurrection and the possibility of that perfect life, unattainable to an inhabitant of earth. After leaving the earth plane, the immortal has been divested of the physical, and progress is unlimited. Again, it was my privilege to have speech with those living beyond my vision. The room in my house in which I carried out my experimental work was intensely dark. As usual, only Mrs. French and I were present. The thought, before so tense, had for a moment become passive. Then from out of the silence came the deep-toned voice of him who spoke the above quoted words. Ever alert to obtain the personal observations of those who have gone on, I said, "I have been told that the afterlife is intensely real, and that, with you, everything is just as tangible as it was when you lived among us. Tell me something of matters surrounding and composing the plane in which you live." He replied, "The most learned scientist among the inhabitants of Earth has practically no conception of the properties of matter, the substance that makes up the universe, visible and invisible. I did not when I lived among you, though I made a special study of the subject. That which you see and touch, making up the physical or tangible, having 3 dimensions, is the lowest or crudest expression of life force, and notwithstanding my long study of the subject, the idea that the physical had permanent etheric or life form, that which you call space was composed of matter filled with intelligent and comprehensive life in higher vibration, it never occurred to me. So when I became an inhabitant of the plane where I now reside, I was wholly unprepared to grasp or comprehend the material conditions of the environment in which I found myself. I asked, "Tell me of your awakening and how things appeared to you as consciousness was restored." "Oh," he replied, "of course there was the meeting and greeting of my own who came to welcome me, as naturally as one returning after a long journey in the earth life would be welcomed. Their bodies were not so dense as when they were inhabitants of earth, but they were like my own. Then I was told that my body and the bodies of all those in that life were actually the identical bodies which we had in earth life, removed of the flesh covering. I was also told that the condition is a necessary precedent to entering the higher life, and that such bodies during earth life had continuity, and further, that in leaving the old I had come into a plane where everything was etheric, that is, matter vibrating in perfect accord with my spirit, or technically speaking, etheric self. To me, everything seemed perfectly natural to sense, sight, and touch." He said, "Again, let me tell you that the outer flesh garment is not sufficiently sensitive to feel. The etheric body alone has sensation. This I have said as leading up to a clear understanding of what I experienced in meeting the new conditions here. I found little body change. I had sensation and vision, and my personal appearance was in no way changed, except that my body was less dense, more transparent, as it were. But the outline of my form was definite, my mind clear, the appearance of age gone, and I stood a man in the fullness of my mentality, nothing lost or gained mentally. What impressed me most, after the meeting with my own, was the reality and tangibility of everything and everyone. All those with whom I came in contact had bodies like my own, and I recognized friends and acquaintances readily. Now, I will tell you of the one thing that impressed me most on coming here. That was that matter, in its intense refinement, in its higher vibration, was capable of intelligent thinking and direction. Shape and grasp this proposition if you can. I could not in the beginning, nor could I comprehend it at once, that all in the universe was life and nothing else. This fact, which we now know, will overturn all the propositions of science. In all the orthodox teachings of nearly 2,000 years, not one law has been given tending to show how it was possible for individual life to hold continuity. theology has claimed it, without explaining how or when or where. This no longer satisfies the human heart or mind, a fact which accounts for the great unrest among your people in every land. For this reason, it has been our aim to explain the law through which life is continued, and so simply to state the facts and explain the condition that all may understand. The key to comprehension is first to realize that your earth does not contain all the matter of the universe, that all that you see and touch is but the substance used by life in growth. When one leaves the earth condition, divests himself of the physical housing, he, through such a change, ceases to be mortal. By becoming a resident of the new sphere, he is said to take on immortality. But in reality, he has always been immortal. You regard the telephone as wonderful, he said. Wireless telegraphy, more wonderful still. But we communicate with each other by simple thought projection. You regard the phonograph as a marvelous instrument, but it is crude beside the instruments in use among us. When you appreciate the truth that we live in a state no less material than your own, you will understand that with our greater age and experience, we are much in advance of you, and make and use appliances and instruments that could hardly be explained to mortal mind. At some other time I may be permitted to discuss this subject more fully. Chapter 25. Rational Deductions. There is not in the universe a single great problem that man can truthfully say he has mastered, that nothing remains to be found out concerning it. The laws that control this world are universal and in force in other spheres as well as this. They control all solar systems and worlds in space. Therefore, a complete comprehension of those laws and their application requires more than mortal life. If this were not so, perfection would be practically immediate and without process, and men would become gods here and now. The most brilliant men who ever lived knew but little of natural laws and of the origin and destiny of man. Until now, little effort has been made to find them out. The earth is yet so crude, our senses are so dull, and our vision so limited, that we fail to realize those emanations and movements of refined matter about us, or the subtle and incessant play of forces around us. From a single ray of light shoot millions of electrons and corpuscles, the basic constituents of matter, smaller than the atom of hydrogen. These, striking blow upon blow, pass by and through us in their incessant warfare with the night, but we feel them not. We do not realize the quivering and bending of the earth's crust under our feet, caused by changes of temperature or the pressure of atmospheric waves, nor do we hear the fermentations and oxidizations of the soil in the changing seasons. We do not even yet know the exact nature of that ether which a recent investigator considers omnipresent and omnipotent. We see the action of gravitation, but know nothing of the medium through which it operates. We hear the wind blowing among the trees, but we do not hear the roar of sap up the trunk and branch, the bursting of buds as they bombard the air, or the speech of growing trees and flowers and grass among themselves. Yet life, wherever found, has language. The vibrations from out the abyss of space would reach our ears if our ears had more and higher octaves, or if our capacity for catching sound were immeasurably intensified. We do not hear the clang of the planets as they ring down through their orbits, the explosive detonations of the sun, the wild dance and chant of the nebulae, the comet's notes of warning, or the rush of wandering matter of which worlds are made, which must send out impulses and tremblings through the ether to this planet of ours. We are at all times in a great sea of intensely active forces and potentialities, governed by a law of which we have little conception. About us, but invisible to most, is a nation, or rather many nations of spirit people who live and move and have their being, more industrious, more active, more intellectual, more energetic than we. So intense is their vibration that we do not ordinarily feel their touch, or hear their voices, or see their forms, but conditions can be made, and have been made, whereby, notwithstanding our limitations, we may have speech with them, and know at least something of how and where they live, and what they are doing. There is so much in nature that we do not understand. Is it any wonder that, having kept our eyes so close to the ground, we have not discovered this spirit world before? We've made conditions in which it became possible for us to know a little of those other people, and even though many have not had this evidence, that does not remove it from the truth of the discovery, which must forever stand as another fact added to the sum total of human knowledge. The possibility of communication between mortals and those in the world of spirits has been proven beyond doubt, and it now remains for men of genius to discover new methods and to bring into this new field of research the same intelligent action that is applied to the lower sciences, thereby increasing our knowledge of the spirits as they have of the material world. Those who, through ignorance or prejudice, decry a new discovery, and so prevent fair consideration, they are the enemies of civilization. The time has come for man to be free and to think alone. Neither the teachings of the so-called dead, nor the conclusions of the living, can change facts or nullify a single natural law. Truth has neither youth nor age. It is, and ever has been, a brother to reason, It does not need the assistance of fame or science. It has never been in the keeping of any particular class of men. It is the heritage of all who live. Let this fact sink deep into every human heart. The individual thought must at all times be kept clean and pure, for the wondrous and ever-active mind of ours is, from day to day, throwing the shuttle through the web of life, incessantly weaving the fabric of the condition that will clothe the naked soul on the threshold of the afterlife, and those in the great beyond watch beside the loom. From this great source I have learned and know that the bridge of death no longer rests upon the clouds of hope, but upon great piers of knowledge, and the heart applauds the brain when one works to increase the force of universal good. Matter is eternal, only form is new, and one who but yesterday, in the flush of health, faced the storms of life with splendid courage, and whose body lies tonight in the embrace of Mother Earth, is no exception to the rule. All that was matter, as we use the term, the outer garment, all that gave him physical expression, will mingle with the substance from which it was formed. But his spirit is eternal. His progression will be unbroken. His horizon will widen as he reaches the sphere beyond. I know that to the limits of that plane in which he lives at first, the human voice will carry, the thought will reach. The so-called dead live here, about us. They know our sorrows and grieve with us. They share our happiness. They know our hopes and ambitions. And, by suggestion through our subconscious brain, they influence our daily conduct. I know that every hope and ambition and desire of earth is continued beyond this life, as is also the burden of wrong. I know that we are as much spirit now as we ever shall be, that in death, so-called, we simply vacate and discard this gross material that gives us a form and an expression on the physical plane. All about this material world of ours, and in it there exists, in fact, the psychic or spiritual universe, more active and real, peopled with all the so-called countless dead who have never died, who no longer, burdened with the physical body, move at will within the boundaries of their sphere, and ours in what appears as space to mortal man. Their life is an active one. All the new conditions, all the great laws by which they are to be governed must be learned, and only by individual effort can they live intelligently and well. I know that a wrong act in earth life must be lived over again in the next, and lived right, before advancement is possible, that the labor is often long, but that families and friends are in time reunited and take up the thread where it was broken. I have heard them talk among themselves and to me. Many eminent men and women, upon my invitation, have heard the same that I have heard in the material conditions that we have made. I know something of the democracy of death, and that all mankind is beginning to hear and march to the silent music of reason. I know, too, that the highest duty of everyone is to contribute what he can to the prosperity of the many. One rich in worldly goods may be mentally poor in a land of opportunity, and this individual life of ours, whether it has had birth within the palace or the hut, no matter how it turns and curves and falls among the hills as it courses from the mountain tops, through valley lands lying at times in stagnant pools of ignorance and vice, festering in the sun, it must some day reach the great ocean of eternal life, from whence it came, clean and pure. We should ever look with eager eyes for gems of truth, and what we find we should have the courage to express. Some mortal lives are so lived that they stand out like trees of flame along the green and wooded shore where waters beat with endless wave. Others, like undergrowth within the endless forest, they remain unknown, but each must, according to the immutable laws of progression, at some time obtain perfect development, which is the heritage of all. This is the law of life. I know that in the kingdom of the mind there can be no personal dictation, that there is no God but universal good, no Savior but oneself, no Trinity, force and mind. I see good in every act of kindness, in all the words of wisdom that fall from human lips, and to me all the good in all the world is God. Chapter 26. A Tribute. On June 24, 1912, at her home in Rochester, New York, Emily S. French, the most perfect psychic of modern times, left this world of ours. She had passed on life's highway the stone that marked 80 and more, and weary with the burden of good deeds and many years, she crossed the golden bridge from life to life. On that June day, as I stood where all that was mortal of my friend was being put away, memory flashed back to a previous time. I saw the open grave of my mother. I felt again the biting winds and the chill of another death, a sensation born of ignorance, and I recalled my early resolution to solve the problems of dissolution or death. Again I stood apart. About me, hills and valleys crowned and carpeted with green, winding roads, lakes and streams, trees and shrubs and flowers, and when the casket was lowered, the sun's rays, rich and warm, fell upon it, and birds sang merrily in the trees. With joy in our hearts, we among the many who came to bid Mrs. French Godspeed, turned homeward, for this good woman, one among millions, had gone to the next life with absolute knowledge of what conditions were to come. She knew that death was not the end, but an open door. One asks, glad that she is gone? Yes, for it is the most glorious privilege possessed by mankind after a long and eventful career, when the shadow lengthens to pass to more intense and comprehensive life. Mrs. French was born possessed of what Mr. Crookes has termed psychic force. From infancy, she had unusual abilities. She could not remember a time when she was unable to see people and hear voices which were neither seen nor heard by others. For this reason, she was in childhood thought peculiar. Then came a period in her young womanhood when, with a pencil in each hand, she would write on different subjects simultaneously, easily conversing at the same time. Automatic writing was not then known or understood, and the suggestion that the beyond was inhabited by people, just as this world is, had not dawned upon our mentality. Afterward, there came, in her presence, under certain conditions, independent voices. That is, a way was found by which the vocal organs of the dead, so-called, could be and were clothed, so that they spoke audibly in our atmosphere, and in this manner came the discovery of another plane inhabited by all the countless dead, where individuality is actually continued, a world as real and tangible as this. It was my good fortune to meet Mrs. French early, and the compact then formed was faithfully kept to the end. She was as anxious as I was to understand the play of forces in her presence, and without payment she freely gave her time and strength, that through her good might come, not only to those living here, but also to those in the great beyond. The idea of accepting money for such service was abhorrent to her, and she devoted her life to the liberation of the mind, that the mental bonds of superstition might be broken, and that mankind might become better by living more intelligently. Her work gave the world a new discovery, and her labor opened the door to the unknown land. Her love went out to those in sorrow, to the unfortunate, the rich, the poor, and the ignorant, and yet, with her great power, she was a child, sincere and frank and full of hope as spring, and she ever borrowed sunshine of tomorrow to make the present glad. She saw into the great beyond, where the modes of motion were too rapid for physical sight. She knew the needs of others, and her charities encompassed them, and as the years passed, and the results became more apparent, the censure of this little world failed to sting. Her span of earth's life was exceedingly long. For many years her physical ear failed to catch sounds. She grew refined and delicate as her life force ebbed. Some years before her dissolution, she became blind, and all the beauty of the physical world was shut out. But still, our wonderful work went on. Toward the end, she became weary with well-doing, and met the change with confidence and courage. Mrs. French passed into the next world gladly, for her psychic sight had already beheld the glories of her new home. She had more friends there than here, and she had often heard the voices of her husband, who gave his life that the union might be preserved, and of her son, who passed just as manhood touched the noon of life. She went not as a stranger into an unknown land, but as one familiar with the way, for just across the border, there waited with outstretched hands and words of welcome countless thousands who had been helped through her effort. The memory of Emily S. French comes like a benediction. Over every cradle, nature bends and smiles, and at this second birth, it does the same. She made me her friend by being honest. I made her my friend by being fair, and so we worked for 20 years and more to learn how to expel the fear of death from the human heart. She grew old as we count time, feeble in body and blind, yet her courage and devotion never waned, and at the end she smiled and met the dawn of everlasting life. She was an instrument through which a great group worked. In her presence, with the necessary conditions, the people in the next plane spoke, and never again can it be said, "The dead know not anything." I cannot give out the knowledge gained through Mrs. French's instrumentality without paying this tribute to her. She was the noblest woman I have known. She was both honest and brave. She enriched herself by aiding others. She helped to stay the tears that fell from furrowed cheeks, and looked with pity on ignorance and superstition. She came to know that all wretchedness and pomp lose distinction in the democracy of death, and that only character survives. To her, in the great beyond, where she now resides, I send my love. We shall meet again. End of chapter 26 and end of The Dead Have Never Died by Edward C. Randall.